Welcome to the Intentional Fulfillment Podcast, hosted by your one and only Alan Nogier. I'm here to help you improve in every facet of life and teach you everything I've learned on a journey toward fulfillment, whether in health, relationships, spirituality, or finances. On this podcast, I'll be giving you my best advice, trainings, and mindset shifts so you can become the person capable of achieving anything.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Intentional Fulfillment Podcast. I am your host, Alan Nogier, and thank you so much for being here today. Today, I have a special guest. His name is Christman, and he is a mentalist. Carl, thank you so much for being here. Tell me a little bit more about what you do. And is it a mentalist or is there more to it?
Well, there's more to it. I basically have two parts of my life.
Yeah.
I'm a college professor, so there's the educational part, which is very formal. Here's the content we're going to get across. Mm-hmm. And there's the mentalist part, which is a little bit more nebulous. It's playing with people's minds, getting a little bit deeper, and trying to read people from a different level. Mm-hmm. And what I do is I combine those together to hopefully give people some content and experiences they've never had before. Yeah. Where when they read my book, How to Read Minds and Influence People, when they come to my training sessions or my keynotes, it's all about trying to get a deeper understanding of who they are and what they want. So I give them the information they get in one of my college classes, but also some more unique things about how to read people's minds, figure out what they're thinking by looking at their micro expressions, their body language, and even cold reading that psychics use. Totally. So that's a long way of answering this kind of weird question. What is this? Well, it's trying to read people from a different perspective. And I come at it from multiple point of views.
Yeah. What I'm really excited about today for the audience listening is that you're not going to only learn about reading other people, but based on what I know about this stuff and kind of what we just talked about before the podcast is really, you're going to understand yourself. Right?
Absolutely.
Tell me about that. What is the process? I mean, just, walk me through your thing.
Definitely. Well, so in my book, I look at two parts. It's called How to Read Minds and Influence People, which is obviously a take on a far more famous previous book. Yes. And I love it when I meet people and they say, I read your book in the 80s. And I, wow.
But you haven't.
Yes, I realize if you think I wrote a book in the 80s, I didn't take better care of myself. I'm not that old. But there's two parts. How do you read other people and how do you influence them? And the influence is all about basic psychological practices that you can use to influence other people. But for that matter, you can use all this stuff to influence yourself, because even though we like to think that we're totally unique and no one else is like us, we all have the same basic human needs, the same basic desires, the same basic motivations. So if I want to help a friend of mine quit smoking, I can use some of these techniques to influence them to quit smoking. But for that matter, if I smoke, I can use these exact same techniques, because it's not tricking people. I'm not going to get someone to do something they don't want to do. It's trying to use techniques to persuade them. And then once they're persuaded, to influence them to actually take action. And so we can use these for ourselves. If I want to make sure that I exercise more, even as the pandemic is winding down, I need to take better care of myself as I reintegrate into actual society. Well, how can I influence myself to do that? By using these techniques. So definitely this stuff can be used for self-improvement or influencing those around you. And I come at this from the perspective that we all basically work in sales. We're always trying to influence other people. If you have kids, you want them to make good decisions, clean up, stay off drugs, study more. For your partner, you want your partner to have the best life possible. So you want him or her to make good decisions. For your friends, for your family members, people at work, you're always trying to influence other people. So what I cover in the book is some of these techniques that you can actually use to influence people, no matter who it is, even if that person is yourself.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So how do you teach this best? Do you teach it through examples, through actually taking someone and like showing the actual process of it, or what is your process?
I love examples. So I use lots and lots of examples.
Beautiful.
When I do this in a live setting, I will have people come up on stage And I'll actually show people here's how you read them, here's how you influence them. In the book and in my lecture, in my trainings, I have many, many examples. Hopefully, these are all things that you can actually relate to. There's things that you would have seen in the news, or I give you the backstory behind them. So I think examples are the best possible way. If it's too theoretical, and you have to have the theory, but that doesn't really move people as well as here's a practical example of what they did, and here's how you can apply it to your life.
Yeah.
So I try to make it as direct as possible.
All right. So let's give the audience one example that you feel like a lot of people can relate to, in which they can apply this. And then that way, once we have that process, that example, then we can kind of break down like how it works so you can apply it in any direction, more the theoretical then.
Oh, absolutely. Well, let me go with something that your audience can actually experience.
Yep.
Just listening to this right now, they can follow along. So I'm going to give you some instructions. I want you to just kind of follow along and use your imagination. And you can participate as well here.
Awesome.
So go ahead and take your hands like this, clasp them together, bend at the elbows. So for those listening, this should look kind of like you're praying. Your hands are clasped, your elbows are bent. I want you to take your index fingers and spread them apart. So take your pointer fingers, spread them apart. There's a few inches between them, and stare at that space between them. And now imagine that there's a magnet at the tip of each finger, pulling them closer and closer and closer together, faster and faster and faster. When I snap my fingers, the power doubles as they go closer and closer, faster and faster and faster. You're trying to resist, but the more you resist, the more you focus. And the more you focus, the closer they get. Perfect. All right, so you can really feel that happening. That is your imagination. So go and tell people what just happened for you.
Guys, if you didn't just do that, rewind it, go back a minute and do it yourself, because literally as soon as he instructed that imagery, I could not resist it, but they came together no matter how hard I tried. That was insane. That was very cool.
Now, that was an example of using your imagination, your motivation to do something. I didn't actually do anything there. I just told you what was going to happen, and you took it from there.
Yeah.
So let's take that a step further. This time, put both of your hands straight in front of you, outstretched straight in front, turn one hand facing palm up, and close your eyes. Close your eyes and imagine. Imagine that in one hand, I place a heavy brick that starts pushing your hand lower and lower and lower as it gets heavier and heavier and heavier. Now imagine that around the other wrist, I tie a string attached to a helium balloon. It starts pulling that hand higher and higher and higher as it gets lighter and lighter and lighter. One hand's dropping as the other one rises, faster and faster and faster. Now, once again, go and open your eyes. And exactly, you can see what's happening there. That's this power of imagination. So this is getting into the right frame of mind, this right mindset to where things happen. So once again, I didn't do anything there. I implanted in your mind this suggestion, and you took it from there. So things like this can be used for your own motivation. If you tell yourself, I'm going to be successful, I'm going to work hard, I'm going to do this every single day, I'm going to get this done, then you will. If you're not sure, I don't think it's going to happen, it probably won't. So I use things like that to try and help us motivate ourselves. And also I look at, here's one of the things I just love talking about, is how you can read other people with no special skills other than observation. So have you ever been to a palm reader before?
I've never been to one, no.
All right. If you ever get a chance, go. It's so much fun. Now, I know that's a very weird way to start this little bit here.
Yeah.
But basically, one of the things I talk about there is how we can read people kind of like the palm readers or the psychics do. Oftentimes they use what's called cold reading, which is where you're trying to pick up certain things that people don't realize they're giving off as they talk. So if you just look at your hand, If I were to go to a palm reader, they would look at the lines and they would try to figure out what that means, what it tells us about people. Actually, that's total BS. Here's what's really going on. You're looking at the hand, and you can tell so much about people just by looking at the hand. So forget the palm, look about everything else. What can you tell about people just by looking at their hand?
Their occupation, potentially, their level of self-love based on their self-care. I mean, yeah, you're totally right.
Absolutely. So you can tell, if you look at my hands, I'm middle-aged. I've got very good hands, like I've never worked a day in my life.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't very much. So you can tell based on the calluses. What do you do? Or if you work out, there'll be calluses in a certain area. I can tell based on the color. How much time do you spend in the sun versus inside? I can look at the cuticles. Do you take care of yourself? If you wear nail polish, what does the color say? There's color symbolism there. You chose it for a reason. If you have rings, what do the rings say about you? I can tell the health because there's certain things that you can tell there might be some health issues going on.
Yeah.
So I can look down at someone's hands for just a few seconds and I can tell so much about them. I can read them and understand what's going on in their life. And I use that as an example because if you can do all that from a person's hand, imagine what you can do for their entire body if you just take a moment, look at them, and think about it. Basically, it's all about empathetic accuracy, which is trying to figure out if I look like you did, what would I be going through? What would the empathy be? What would I be feeling? And just ask yourself, through this idea of empathetic accuracy or projection, what would I be experiencing? So I can look at you, the way you're dressed, the way you sit, your posture, your body language, your face. All this tells me so much about you.
Yeah.
So this goes to the first part of what I cover. How do you read people? If I can figure out a little bit more about you, what are you thinking? What are you experiencing? What's going on in your mind? And then influence. How can I influence them like I influenced you with the fingers and the hands? And by doing that, hopefully it unlocks a whole kind of host of options that we can actually take to try and improve our lives and others.
Yeah. What I absolutely love about this concept that I hope people will take away from this as well is the power of listening, especially when it comes to sales, not just selling in business, but selling any kind of value, whether it's to your kids, your family, to other people, whether it may be sales as well. It's, in sales, there's this saying that says, whoever speaks first loses. Why? Because the person who speaks first is not the person who's listening first. It's the person who understands the other person. That's where a sale comes from, and to understand someone, yes, for what, everything that is said about their hands and all these things, but also what that says about what they value. Because behind all these things you're talking about, there's also subliminal things that say a lot about their values, and selling and influencing someone based on their values. Can you tell me something, tell me more about that?
Oh, absolutely. I use the metaphor of sales because I find it really helpful. My whole book, keynotes, trainings, it's all about sales because I think that is the broadest concept that we can use. We all work in sales. Many people listening now will actually work in sales. They sell a product or a service. They get paid based on whether people buy something or use something. But for that matter, everyone else does as well. If you work just in an office, you are always trying to sell people. You're trying to sell your coworkers to follow the plan, to go along with what you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to sell your boss on why you should work there, and hopefully that you should get a promotion and a raise at some point. Everyone else does that as well. Good doctors tell you what the problem is. Great doctors sell you on the solution. It's not enough just to diagnose what's going on. You have to get people to take action because honestly, we know what the problem is half the time. We all know that if we would just eat healthier, exercise more, and take the medication we're supposed to, we would be way healthier. So it's not enough just to walk in the room and say, here's your problem. They have to be salespeople, especially now as the COVID vaccine is out there. One of the biggest jobs for doctors, which they weren't necessarily trained for, is salespeople. They have to sell people on the idea of taking the vaccine, wearing a mask, social distancing.
Yeah.
Everyone else does this as well. Lawyers, obviously, are in sales. They have to sell judges and juries and the other lawyers on this solution. You're trying to persuade people. As a college professor, I have to sell the students on education, on why the content I'm sharing is important, because honestly, my class is required. They have to take it to graduate. So I can make it as boring as I wanted to. They would still be there. But in order to really get people into it, so they actually learn something, I need to explain to them, guys, forget the fact that this is required. Here's why it's important. I need to sell them on that. If you work freelance, you're in sales. You're always selling yourself. If you don't have a job and you want a job, you definitely work in sales because you are selling yourself to the potential employees. The resume, that's a sales pitch. The interview, that's a sales meeting. You have to very quickly explain to them why they should hire you. If you're single and don't want to be, you definitely work in sales. The dating apps, those little profiles, those are sales pitches. It's one paragraph with a picture or two explaining why you're an awesome person that they should go out with you. First date, that's obviously a sales meeting. You need to convince people in an hour or two that you're not creepy. They should go out with you more. They should hang out with you. So we always work in sales, which is why what I talk about applies to pretty much anything, whether you're selling your kids on the idea of being good citizens, growing up to be good adults, doing what they're supposed to, whether you're trying to sell your partners, your friends on an idea. So this idea of influence applies to pretty much everything, whether it's in the corporate world or anywhere else.
Yeah, totally. I want to point out to the audience, because I know that some people have this negative connotation around the word sales, right? To those listening who are in sales or love sales or have created a positive association with sales, you won't have this problem. But to the opposite, you might have where you're kind of resenting a little bit of this concept in this way. You might be asking yourself, you might be saying, yeah, but, and then searching for reasons why this doesn't apply. But I guarantee you what Carl is saying 100% applies. And you can just call it something else if that helps you. And you can just call it influencing to, maybe it's just influence. Maybe it's just manifesting a life that you want, right? Because you're finding the reasons why it's important, right? And so there's something that you said there within what you were saying, which is selling is about understanding the reasons why. But more importantly, I would add, it's understanding the reason why in relationship to what you value, to what the person in front of you values, whether that's your child. Ask yourself, what do they value, right? And then can you, based on your practice, I want to ask you, how do you identify, these micro expressions, all these things, and how might someone use them to identify those deep core values that you had mentioned every human has at the beginning of this podcast? You had mentioned that.
Well,
that deep and fundamental human.
Absolutely. Part of what you were talking about, how it has a negative connotation, and I totally get that, because salespeople, it sounds awful. And that's because you're putting your own needs, your own goals ahead of someone else. An example of that is a job I had when I was in graduate school. One summer in graduate school, I worked as a car salesman. It was the worst job ever. I hated every minute of it. But it was interesting seeing all these guys out there trying to sell vehicles. And most of the time, our needs of making the sale and getting the commission came ahead of the person there that was trying to buy a vehicle or looking at a vehicle. So that's what gives salespeople a bad name. Now, my problem was it was a dealership that sold a lot of SUVs, and I'm more of an environmentalist. So I'd have people coming in there looking at vehicles they didn't need. And it's like, guys, one guy come in there, one of this massive SUV. And I said, oh, okay. Do you have a big family? No. Do you travel a lot? Not really. do you have a boat or a trailer? No. Then get a car.
Totally.
So in looking at it from my perspective, you should definitely take this massive vehicle that you don't need, that costs twice what anything else would. But for you, here's what you really need, which is why I didn't last there very long.
Yeah, that's the best kind of salesman who understands because what do salesmen do? They fill a need. You're not trying
Absolutely.
to sell your product. You're trying to fill their needs, and they make it about others, and it's never about you. That's beautifully said.
Absolutely. So these basic human needs that we all have, I want to figure out, how can I help you achieve that? And it all comes with listening. I want to figure out, what is your goal? And then I want to see if I can fulfill this. So when I speak to a group, first thing I do is I need to talk to whoever brought me in and figure out, what is it you hope your team to accomplish? What is it they want? And then I can tailor what I'm talking about, because I want to help people achieve their goals. Now, sometimes that involves making good decisions, but oftentimes it's not even about persuading them. It's about helping them influence their own goals, influence them to achieve their own goals. For example, there's 3 levels here. 3 levels of influence. We've got coercion, persuasion, compliance gaining. Coercion is where I can force you to do something. As long as I have a gun, I can get you to do whatever I want. Obviously, that's not very helpful. And that's a very extreme example. So let's take your kids. You can pay your kids to study and get good grades. You can pay them to clean their room. The problem is, once they move out, they are definitely not going to study or clean up after themselves. So that was pointless. So coercion's terrible. Persuasion, I can persuade you that something's important. And that's good. But oftentimes there's so many things that we know we should do, but we still don't do. And there's things that we shouldn't do, things we shouldn't do that we know the opposite. It doesn't really help. We need to influence people, because I know that smoking is not healthy. Everyone I know who smokes knows that smoking is not healthy. There's absolutely no one in America that smokes and doesn't realize, wait, it's bad for me. So I don't need to persuade people not to smoke. I want to help influence them. Here's how to take action. Here's how to actually quit smoking. If I'm speaking to a corporate group, I don't need to help them figure out what their goals are. Oftentimes, they already know those goals. I don't need to persuade them what's right. I want to help influence them to actually take those actions. And same thing with my friends. Just in a brief conversation, I know what my friends' goals are. This one wants to do better at work. This one wants to get married. This one wants to buy a different house and move. I know what their goals are just by having a brief conversation. So in the idea of selling the idea, I don't need to help them figure out what they want. And for that matter, I don't need to push anything on them that they don't want. I just, in my role, I want to help them. I want to help influence them to actually take the steps to achieve that. So I know, if you want to get in shape, if you want to be healthier, great, that is your goal. I'm not pushing that on you, but here are several techniques. Here's how you can use social proof by hanging out with people who are already in shape. Here's how you can change your mindset. See yourself as a person who is in shape. Here's all sorts of psychological techniques. So it's really not trying to sell people an idea that they're not interested in. It's trying to help them take the steps that through past experiences will help them achieve what they want.
Yeah, that's so beautifully said. And the big takeaway that I'm really grabbing from this is I always say motivation does not work. And I learned that when I was a personal trainer, because I work with hundreds of clients where obviously, like, I could motivate them or I could internally inspire them from within themselves. And motivation never works, because motivation implies external force acting on you. Just like you said, you can coerce someone by paying them and then they'll do it. But what happens when the external force is gone? What happens when the motivation is gone? You won't do it. And so it requires internal inspiration. And internal inspiration comes from something that is already important to you, something you already value. And I would ask everyone listening, look at what you already do. What are you already consistent in? What is already showing up in your life as already valuable? And it sounds to me like that part where you're showing actionable things, right? Like you're surrounding yourself, and thus you're creating a societal association, right? What is that doing but allowing you to connect what you want to do with, or better said, your goal of what you want to do with an embodiment that you are already that thing, right? What I'm saying is you're inspiring yourself to already be that thing, not to have something else force you to be that thing. You see what I mean? Motivation, inspiration.
Absolutely. And the problem with just motivation is we are all very motivated. We're all motivated to do things on the spot. If you listen to an amazing motivational speech, and I do motivational speeches, and afterwards you walk out of there thinking, yeah, I can do this. The problem is I want to make sure it lasts for more than a day. So a lot of what I cover is psychological techniques that you can use to create those habits. Because if it's just motivation, it's going to quickly dry up. If you create a habit, you're gonna do things. Like one that I use, I love linking. So the process of linking really can help you take action. So whenever I find a really good book, I will not let myself read that book unless I'm reading that on a treadmill. Or if I find a podcast that I just love this podcast, I will only listen to that podcast while I'm hiking or jogging or doing something productive. So in that case, I don't have to be motivated. Actually, I take that back. I am motivated because I want to listen to the podcast or read the book. Those are fun. I therefore, by linking, will do things that I'm really not motivated to do because I hate jogging with a passion.
Yeah.
So by creating these habits, you move past that motivation, that initial motivation, and you make it long-term changes in your life that will actually get things to happen. If I'm motivated to get in shape and be healthy, that's quickly going to pass once I see some junk food or find something more fun than exercising and eating healthy. So by creating connections with other people who I know are already healthy, it's going to be that long-term thing. So, these are my friends. I like hanging out with my friends. And because my friends are all very healthy, I guess we're going to cook at home rather than going to a fast food restaurant. I guess we're going to go for a hike rather than hanging out at the bar. So through those connections, I'm going to take that short-term motivation and extend it by changing my lifestyle as a whole.
Yeah, totally.
And now a quick word from today's sponsor. And today this episode is brought to you by your one and only, that's right, that's me, Alan Nogier's very own book. It's called Intentionally Fulfilled. Now this book is all about becoming intentional toward a life that you love. It's about becoming fulfilled. I help you do this through an actionable process of manifesting your greatest reality that you can implement as you're reading the book. On this journey, you're going to discover an insane amount of spiritual undertones, understanding of the egoic godlike complex, how your finances, relationships, your health, how it all ties together so that you can become intentional in every aspect of your life. And I promise when you're done reading this book, you will not be the same person. Now, if you're enjoying this podcast, go ahead and find this book on Amazon, either on paperback or Kindle version by typing in Intentionally Fulfilled or by typing in my name, Alan Nogier. I hope you get a chance to read it, and if you do, it would mean the world to me if you left me a review. Now let's go ahead and get back to the episode.
So I love this concept of influencing the self. Once people have mastered this, can you give us like an example? Like I would love, because I think one of those core human things that is true for every human is a love or a desire to bear children, right? Or influence, even if you don't bear your own, to influence a legacy. And a legacy is passed down from generations, right? So I just want to use kids as an example. How do you use this topic when it comes to children, right?
Oh, absolutely. And so I don't have children, but I have nieces and nephews. And so what I've done is I'm trying to help prepare for them. So there's college savings, there's things set up for them. And this goes to the highest level of Maslow's hierarchy. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we all have the same basic human needs. There's physiological needs, food, shelter, clothing. Then we've got safety needs. We've got, I need to know that my family will be safe, my friends will be safe, I'm not going to have health issues, I'm not going to be chased down the street with an axe. Then we've got social needs. I need to have friends and family, a relationship, love in my life. We've got, what comes after that? We've got, it goes all the way up to self-actualization, which is the highest need, to be self-actualized. And that goes to what you're talking about. that deeper purpose. There's a purpose.
Yes.
Oh, not just I have food and shelter, I'm safe. There's that deeper meaning. There's that deeper purpose, which is a legacy in the future. How do I want people to remember me? So we often think that we're unique, but no, we all have these same basic human needs. And by figuring out this influence, these techniques for influence, we can hopefully make changes that last, that fulfill these needs long term.
Yeah. So how would you identify in someone which need is the need that you need to target? And then once you've identified that need of what is relevant and important to this person in their life right now, how would you influence them knowing that need, right? So first, how do I identify the need? And then how do we influence based on that need?
So the first step, as you were mentioning before, is just listening. Listen to people, talk to them. And oftentimes people don't need to be persuaded what their needs are. They know what they are. And it won't take you long to figure out, oh, here's what you want. Just have a conversation with someone. And they will steer the conversation towards those needs. When I've done consulting with medical practices, one of the biggest things we talk about is spending time with the patient. Because sometimes if they just come in and they take 30 seconds, look at the chart, here's what's going on. Well, maybe not. Talk to them, have a short conversation, and you can very easily figure out what their actual needs are. And then once you know what they are, step 2 is, what's preventing you from achieving those needs, of getting those needs fulfilled? And then you can go through the tools that you have. So what I cover in the book is all sorts of tools that you might be able to use. You are very unlikely to use everything I talk about, but here's a toolbox full of things that you can use to influence people. And then choose which ones you think will work the best. And once you've got those, you can start to apply to the situation. Not in a secret way. You're not trying to trick people, but you can just tell them, here's what's going on. Here's what's preventing you from achieving that. Try this. And you can share these needs with other people with their permission. So the problem with unethical salespeople is that they're trying to trick people. I'm not trying to trick people unless I tell them, like, guys, here's a way to kind of counteract your negative thoughts. Here's a way of doing this. And then work with them to make it a kind of a team effort to achieve their goals.
Yeah. I think that 3-step process of identify your needs, and not just yours, but others. You can apply this both ways to yourself and to other people, but identify the needs and then ask yourself, what's holding me back from achieving those needs? And then implement, right? And implementation can be many tools. That's where reading your book, I know my book goes through a lot of those tools, coaching, mentorship, anything of that sort, right? And I mean, those aren't the tools, but they are resources to get the tools, right? And I know that 3-step process is so beautiful because I think anyone who ever teaches or coaches, if you're a coach, if you're a teacher, if you're some kind of mentor, you need to know that 3-step process because it shows up in every teacher's differently. But, you know, for me, I say the exact same thing. I just word it slightly different. You know, it's identify your value. And once you know what you value and you have that internal compass to direct you, all right, what are the things in your life that are not aligned with that? Because that stuff is probably limiting you, right? Because where your focus goes, your energy flows. So if you're focused on the wrong thing, guess what? You can't be focused on the right thing. And this is where the beauty of minimalism comes in, right? Or essentialism, right? Remove the things in your life. That's one magical tool that I love to use. Remove the things in your life that then allow you to become value focused and then implement, right? And that's just one example of a tool. Can you give me one example of a tool from your book that you really like?
Oh, absolutely. So there's a 4-part tool that I use. I use the acronym SAIL, which is S is for social proof, A is for authority, L is for likability, and E is for exclusivity. And those are 4 tools that you can use to influence people. So social proof, if you can make things seem popular. Authority, if you want to seem like you're the expert in the field. L, likability. People like to listen to people they like. People are more likely to use products and services that they like. And then E is for exclusivity. The more difficult something is to get, the more likely people are to actually want that product or service.
Yes.
So to give you one example of those four, for likability, the cola wars of the late 80s, early 90s is a great example of this, between Coke and Pepsi. So for those who don't remember, here's basically what happened with the Pepsi challenge. So Coke and Pepsi were going back and forth trying to attack each other, make sure people knew their soda was the best. And so Pepsi went out, they did what was called the Pepsi challenge. They went out there and they had people do a blind taste test to try two different sodas. And then they revealed at the very end, the one that people liked the most was Pepsi. By and large, people preferred Pepsi. Coke heard about this. They thought, well, that's got to be just a marketing gimmick. So Coke went out and tested the same thing. Sure enough, people preferred Pepsi. So they created New Coke. New Coke was a different formulation. And then in a blind taste test, the number one choice was New Coke. Number two was Pepsi. Number three was Coke, which became Coke Classic. Then they launched New Coke. You can't get New Coke right now because that was one of the biggest product failures ever. And they found that when people knew what it was, they hated New Coke. And to this day, even though they didn't change the formula, people still prefer Coke over Pepsi, even though in a blind taste test, they don't like it as much.
Yeah.
And so the question is, why would people drink a soda they don't like as much instead of one that they actually prefer? And the reason is likability. When you think about Coke, you are not thinking about sugar water with carbonation. You're thinking about the branding. Because for our entire lives, we've seen thousands of commercials and advertisements all over the place. When I think Coke, I just finished Narcos on Netflix. When I think Coke, I think Escobar. But when I think Coke, I'm thinking about polar bears frolicking in the North Pole. I'm thinking about Santa Claus.
That's what I think about.
I'm thinking about, oh, my dad drank Coke. It's all about this brand. So for people, when I'm working with people to improve things, it's not about what the actual product, service, experience goal is. It's about this brand. So for a personal brand, that would be, how do I want people to view things around me? So at work, hopefully I do a good job. If I do a bad job, they will probably fire me. But if I do the same job as everyone else, then it's all about that likability, that personal brand. Do they want to be around me because I'm fun, they enjoy me, I'm a friendly person, and I do the job? For my friends, same basic thing. They're going to like me because of that past experience, that personal brand, that they know me as someone who's dependable, reliable, friendly. So that personal brand and that likability is almost more important than the actual goal that you have that you're trying to accomplish, because oftentimes the goals are kind of standard. We all have the same basic goals. It's that personal branding that makes people want a specific solution, a specific person, a specific idea.
Yeah, I'm so glad you say that, because likability is such an overlooked asset that if you have it, don't sleep on it. And if you don't have it, then work on it, because everybody listening, if you feel like you may not be likable, it's not that you were born that way. It's a skill, just like every other character trait. It's a skill and you work on it, right? I remember when I was a little kid, I was likable all my life, but I was super quiet, right? And so what added to my likability was simply that I learned how to speak. I learned how to talk. I learned how to influence people, right? And then that just made me the next level of likability, right? So it's a character trait. Everything in your personality bucket is a skill, right? Whatever you think you were born with, it's actually a skill. Your happiness is a skill. You practice being happy, right? It's not your state, it's your practice, right? Like ability, happiness. What were your the S-A and E?
SALE, social proof, authority, likability, and exclusivity.
There is practice in every single one of those. And so it's the ownership you take over them and take to intentionally implement and become better in each one. So I'm really glad you said likability, because so overlooked.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to ask Carl, where did all this come from? Why did it start? Why did you? I don't know.
So I've spent most of my adult life in education. I've actually never left college.
Yeah.
I went to college, didn't want to get a job, so I went to grad school. Didn't want to get a job, so I stayed and taught, and now I'm a professor of communication. So there's the educational component,
Mm-hmm.
and then just on the side, just studying mentalism, which is kind of more of an entertaining way of playing with the mind, where it combines hypnosis, NLP, mind reading through micro expressions, and that's kind of the more entertaining presentational aspect. And so by combining these two, I've come up with my sales training and my book, which is How to Read Minds and Influence People, which is hopefully either the most educational show people will ever experience or the most entertaining lecture. So what I'm trying to do there is help people improve their communication skills, improve their cognitive ability, and really be able to read people and influence them better.
Yeah.
So what I'm just trying to do here is take all the different tools that I've put together throughout my life, which is what most of your listeners are going to do. Everyone listening has had a different life experience. And so you've gone through so many different things. You take those tools, you're the only one with that unique skill set. So I've taken my unique skill set of reading minds through mentalism and the academic aspect of all these concepts, put them together to hopefully really give people a unique experience in my book and the training sessions.
Yeah, it definitely feels unique. It's so specific and so beautiful. I mean, if anybody ever comes across any material that's mind reading, like that stuff, realize it's not as abstract of a concept once you speak to someone like yourself who breaks it down to, it's not like some like psychic thing. It's a real science to it, once you actually learn the process. And when you do, you become a next level human being who can understand people, right? The book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, right? The book that your book is based on.
Yeah.
It's all about understanding others, non-judgment. Like, what I love about your practice is you're making the world a better place simply by the art of understanding other human beings, so that we don't get so caught up within ourselves, within our own validation, our own ego, and all of our own pain, because I really think when you make it about others, you gain perspective on life, and that perspective deepens your own meaning, So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. The last thing I want to ask you is, what's, based on everything that you've talked about today, your specific niche, what is that actionable thing that if people did it, they would be able to live a more intentionally fulfilled life that would really take their personal life to the next level?
I think it just goes back to what you said in the beginning. Listen to other people, talk less, listen more, be more observant. And what mind reading is getting inside someone else's mind by taking their perspective, asking yourself, if I were that person right now, if I looked like they did, if I was sitting like they were sitting, if I were dressed the way they were, what would I be experiencing? It's just all about that empathy, and listening more will help us achieve that.
Wow. Yeah, that's beautifully said. And I hope everybody listens, takes action on that, because that will absolutely change someone's life if they actually really start doing that day to day. Carl, thank you so much. I just want to ask, where can people find you? Your book, tell us, where can they find that?
Absolutely. So my website is drcarlreadsminds.com. And my book is How to Read Minds and Influence People. That's available on Amazon. Or if you just go to my website, there's a link to it there as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Carl. That was absolutely spectacular. And guys, remember to share this, screenshot it, post it on your stories, share it on your Snapchat, share it with someone who needs to hear it, who's in sales, who's a parent, who's in a relationship, and you just want to be better at building relationships. Carl, thank you so much. And I wish you the best.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did find it super valuable and you want to share it with the world, make sure to screenshot, post, and tag me on Instagram so I can see what you're up to and we can connect more. And to get notified on the next episode with me, go ahead and subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen. Now get out there, do great things, be a decent human, and I will see you next time.